final speaker is Michael Zbyszyński. I think
Dobra, dziękuję.
Okay, from Goldsmiths College, University of London. And his speech will be about machine learning for musical control using EMGs, which you will explain to us what EMG is. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me. As I said, I'm involved in this project with Atao, who spoke yesterday, and Valentino, who gave a demo yesterday, so maybe you've already seen this, and we're making new musical instruments. So just to kind of give a run-up into where I'm coming from, if you heard Atao's talk yesterday, he's coming from this project Metagesture Music. I'm coming from an EU project called Rapid Mix, where I was designing a general-purpose machine learning API for artists, luthiers, composers, creative people. So I've been making kind of low-level tools for this, and now I get to get into the actual application of let's make an instrument using either my API or some other bits. And I also come at this sort of from two directions. My training is in music. I used to be classical musician, but I then became a software developer, and now I'm in the computing department at Goldsmiths. So hopefully that either makes me very conflicted or able to embody kind of a couple of different problems. Okay, so EMG, electromyogram. This is a sensor that senses the electrical activity of your muscles. And then music. So we all come together under the umbrella of music, and we know music is potentially difficult. As a computer problem, it's difficult because timing is probably the primary element. We want things to happen with no latency, with no jitter. So this puts serious limits on what we can do in real time. Expressivity is a problem. I mean, just to sit and define expressivity is a problem, but we want our music to have this quality with detail, with organic richness, with all kinds of expression. You want things that are happening continuously. You want to control a musical instrument. You're always engaged with it. And a lot of the research with these sensors is about prosthetics, and I'll argue in a couple of places that this is slightly a different problem than controlling a prosthetic, a hand, for instance. So EMG itself is also hard. One, because our muscles, in fact, are noisy. I'll talk about this abstraction of a drive signal that in my mind I decide I'm going to do something with this muscle. Well, there's a whole bunch of muscle cells in here, and they're sort of firing at random all the time. And when I want to do something, there's kind of a crowdsourcing where more of them are going to fire simultaneously than previously. But there's a lot of noise in there, and it's very individual. Different people are different in the way they use their muscles. Whether I'm tired or not tired makes a difference. Then there's this whole idea of a gesture. The way if I move my hand like this, I can do it using different muscles. It's not the same across person to person or even performance to performance by the same person. And then the last difficulties are just back into more the aesthetic problem of designing meaningful gestures. If we're going to have muscles controlling things on stage, what is that going to be? How's that going to mean? How's the motion going to communicate? Are we going to have objects? I'm going to play the flute tonight. Atao's going to not play the flute. There's just a lot of diversity. So how are we going to deal with this? I am engaged in tackling these problems with probabilistic modeling and machine learning. Specifically, so let's just start small and work our way out. If you think about one sensor on one muscle, as I said, muscle cells are noisy. Also, we're sensing them from the surface, so cells nearer to the sensor are going to have a disproportionate impact relative to cells further away. And also, the electrical current isn't that much, so we have to filter out noise from, say, the heart, noise from electrical systems around us. And so it's a difficult thing. We've been working on, whether here I'm demonstrating this Mayo, which is a commercial solution, but we're working on custom hardware solutions that may not be better. So if we have one muscle, one sensor, then we want feature extraction. We want, at the very least, this idea of a drive signal. How hard am I trying to activate this muscle? And there are a bunch of traditional methods. the traditional digital signal processing approach might be RMS or averaging or zero crossing counting. All of those work better, but work well, but if you're familiar with them, they offer a trade-off between stability and latency. That is, the bigger your buffer for RMS, the more latency you have. So just quickly, here's a screenshot of raw EMG signal, and you can see that it's quite noisy. Essentially, it's like a Gaussian or a Laplacian distribution around this so-called drive signal. Here's an RMS version of that, which actually does a pretty good job. It's quite a functional way to do an envelope. But here's this Bayesian filter, which models this envelope as a probabilistic process. And what it's able to do is recognize attacks much quicker. So, pardon me. So if what I'm wanting you to get out of this is that the blue waves are about one notch earlier than the green, and they also come back down a lot quicker. So when if I have a gesture where I want to trigger an attack, I'm going to get that right when I want it. And in fact, the cool thing about EMG is I might get it a little ahead. I mean, if you think about the path between I want to make a sound, I'm going to send a signal to my muscles are going to move my hand, and my drumstick is going to hit the cymbal. If you took the trigger from a microphone, that's when the action already happened. But the muscle starts, we can get this stuff early. So we have a good jump on this latency problem. So let's move to bigger, so that the single muscle thing is working pretty well. Now we have a bunch of sensors, a bunch of muscles. For a forearm, we can imagine, there's basically 4 big muscle groups that control a lot of what's going on here. And as I say, we all use these as ensembles, and we can realize the same apparent gesture with different performance. Not to mention, maybe we want to make musical instruments for people whose range of expression is different than so-called normative. Some people, there's all kinds of adaptive, assistive technology implications. There's also an issue of opposition. Isometric versus isotonic. If I'm moving a prosthetic, I really want to know, okay, the hand is over here. But I can move that hand in one way, just pulling down this muscle. I can move it isometrically where I'm opposing with other muscles. And that might not really matter if I just want to move a hand, but if we're doing something artistic, the perceived effort, the perceived energy going into a motion is really critical. Atao has talked about Laban effort, this idea. I've done a lot of video tracking of dancers, and one of the things they really dislike about that is, if I'm just counting moving pixels, I've had dancers say, well, I feel like, this didn't require a lot of work and I got a huge reaction, but this required a lot more work and I got the same reaction, and that's not satisfying. And it's because their perceived effort wasn't related to the number of pixels that changed. So this is where we're starting to get into machine learning, classifying postures, static gestures using, I'm actually using k-nearest neighbor a lot, which is a really simple machine learning algorithm, but it works most of the time. Support vector machines, Gaussian mixture models. Actually, Gaussian mixture models are what you'll hear today. The other thing is, it's important to know where the arm is. I'm holding my hand against gravity here, whereas if I've changed my posture, the muscles are doing something different. So we've got IMUs in here, so now we're into sensor fusion. Accelerometers, gyroscopes, this is all playing in. There are different sample rates, all of these engineering problems, etc. So the final challenge, once I've figured out what the individual muscles are doing, maybe then I've figured out, given what the muscles are doing, where the hand is, what I want to do is temporal modeling. I want to capture gestures that happen in time. Atao showed conducting. Music is full of gestures that happen in time, and we all know what they are. So I want to be able to not only recognize them, but recognize them, if I don't know that there's a cue coming until I hit it, that's too late, right? So you want to know I'm cueing you when that starts. So we've got to recognize early, we've got to know where I am in the gesture. So there's a lot of detail that we want. And also just expression and variation of gesture. Am I giving you a big cue? Am I giving you a small cue? So all of these make this a really exciting problem. So this is leading up to a demo of I'm taking EMGs, IMU, I'm using the Bayesian filter, I'm doing some feature extraction to figure out where the position of the arm is, stuffing this into various machine learning, and let's see if we can get some audio output. So, pardon my Macs. And this is all on the fly. All right, so here I'm going to train a gesture, and it's a gesture that looks like this. So I'm going to do it. Let's see if this works. Okay, for the sake of this demo, all my gestures are exactly 1 second long, which is possibly an oversimplification. I'll make another gesture. I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to do this. Okay, and I'm going to do a third gesture. You know, my mentor, David Wessel, always told me that instruments shouldn't make noise if you're not doing anything, so I'm just holding my hand. Oops, that wasn't what I meant to do. Just recorded over gesture 2. So gesture 2 looked like this. Gesture 3 looks like relaxing, and that's going to be silence. Okay, I'm going to hit train. So I'm training up a series of hierarchical hidden Markov models that have segmented these gestures into a series of Gaussian mixture models, and, well, hilarity ensues. So let's see if I have sound. Aha, here, pardon me. Let's try again. All right, so here's gesture 1. And you can see I'm advancing through the states here. And up here is gesture 2. So this one is a pulse wave with a filter. This one's a little more interesting. It's a bunch of resonant filters with that are modeling a tubular bell. But I'm taking the raw EMG from this muscle. And here's silence. From this muscle, and I'm putting the EMG signal directly into these resonant filters. So not only am I doing this kind of high-level analysis of the semantic quality of this gesture, I'm also using the raw signal as excitation. So that's kind of two interesting ways to use this stuff. And over here, it's ringing, and over here, it's damped. So I've got these two worlds. And I'm using the probability that where I am matches one of those gestures to crossfade between them. So I can get where there's a middle ground. You know, as artists, we always go for the middle ground and the edges. And, you know, as a saxophonist, I'm always trying to make it break and do a multiphonic. And, you know, I spend all this time on classical technique only to then spend twice as much time unlearning it. So here's a prototype of an instrument. And I think that's probably, as I say, it was a very lightning tour through where we're going. But you know, we're refining our approaches with machine learning. We're refining our approaches with gesture design. And you know, this project just kicked off a month ago, 2 months ago. And so in a year or so, we're going to have some really lovely instruments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. There has been a mistake because the program I have didn't say that there's a final speaker, so we have just 1 minute for a question. I'm sorry for that. If there is anyone a question, because there's one more speaker and we have a concert at 6.
Oh yeah, and I'm playing that concert, so.
Well, if not, we can thank you for your amazing presentation and go for the last speaker of today.